Solid reasons why empathy makes your marriage work. Hi friends, welcome to Marriage Realities, a comprehensive relationship channel. Today's video is all about the reasons why empathy is important to make your marriage work. If you know the real meaning of empathy, you'll understand its real importance in your relationship. Empathy is understanding the emotions of others from their viewpoint. A quality drastically needed in all spheres of your life, more important to your married life. It is because when you understand your spouse from his or her point of view, it brings the real emotional well-being your marriage drastically needs. Mostly, you do not empathize with your spouse to make him or her feel sheltered and cared in your relationship. You're that concentrated on your own thoughts, views and comfort that you fail to understand what your spouse really thinks or feels. It is sad that you do not realize that empathy is a powerful medicine which cures many of your relationship ailments. How exactly does empathy transform your relationship? It makes your spouse feel loved and understood by you. It makes your spouse feel that you're not taking him or her for granted. Why does your spouse feel fulfilled being married to you when you're empathetic? It is because when you're empathetic, you also become sympathetic towards the feelings of your spouse. You understand what your spouse is implying without construing hidden meaning into it. You become compassionate and emotionally connected with your spouse. When you behave in such a manner with your spouse, it brings many positive changes in your relationship. You must realize that your relationship with your spouse will always be a battle of emotions. Your spouse undergoes many emotional upheavals in his day-to-day interaction with you. One day your spouse is angry with you. Another day your spouse feels bitter against you. There are days when your spouse feels loving towards you. Many a time your spouse feels emotionally bonded with you. The emotional changes of your spouse occur according to the situations he or she faces with you. When there are arguments between you, your spouse feels angry. When you utter hurtful words against your spouse, he or she feels bitter against you. When you display care towards your spouse, he or she feels connective love towards you. Can you see how the emotions of your spouse are never stable and static? When you do not understand the reasons behind the anger, resentments, longings and feelings of your spouse, you cannot enjoy real togetherness in your marriage. But when you understand the reason behind the reactions of your spouse in a particular situation, he or she feels that you're perfectly understanding and thoughtful. Your spouse literally craves that you should understand his feelings, reactions and thoughts. Sadly, you totally ignore the emotions of your spouse. You never try to understand your spouse from his or her viewpoint. And your spouse also never tries to understand your viewpoint. This is the sorry state of affairs in most relationships. When you do not understand your spouse from his or her angle, it creates tons of resentment in your relationship. You might say that you are unable to understand what your spouse is really feeling or thinking because he or she does not openly confess about it. Strangely, you are very empathetic in your workplace and understand the viewpoint of your colleagues with uncanny precision. You perfectly understand what the management expects from you. You are also compassionate towards the feelings of your friends. But you do not have the capacity to understand your spouse from his or her angle. I do not know what my spouse expects from me. Most of you are all at sea about what your spouse has in his or her mind about you. Sad, isn't it? Why do you find it impossible to understand the innermost feelings of your spouse? The answer is very simple. You have no patience to understand the real viewpoint of your spouse as you're more concentrated on your own comfort level. You must realize that when you do not empathize with your spouse, there can be no real happiness and contentment in your relationship. In fact, when there's no empathy and understanding in your married life, your spouse feels bitter and resentful against you. You too feel bitter and resentful against your spouse when he or she does not understand you. The beauty and success of any marriage is when husband understands the viewpoint of his wife and wife understands the viewpoint of her husband. The sad thing is that it never happens. How exactly can you empathize with your spouse? It is the simplest thing in the world. You just need to cross over to the side of your spouse. It is not a physical crossing over. It is the emotional crossing over to the side of your spouse and see everything from his or her viewpoint. Empathy has that much of power. When your spouse is angry with you, you immediately gear yourself up to retaliate in vengeance without thinking about the reasons for his or her anger. But when you are empathetic, you look at the anger of your spouse from his or her viewpoint. You will never ignore your spouse when he or she is downcast and sad. You will instantly step in to console your spouse as you realize he or she is under some tremendous pressure. When you're empathetic, it instantly makes your spouse feel cared by you. Your caring words and behavior makes your spouse come out of his or her depression very easily. When you support your spouse in his or her times of need, it cements your relationship with incredible happiness. Do you know lack of empathy is one of the top reasons for failed marriages? When you're always concentrated on your own viewpoint, you fail to see the aspects and characteristics which your spouse resents about you. But when you understand your spouse from his or her viewpoint, there is perfect understanding between you. It is sad that most of you live through your married life aimlessly. You never make any efforts to understand the inner needs of your spouse. When you understand that happiness in your married life depends upon how well you interconnect with the inner needs of your spouse, you will turn empathetic and sympathetic. When you do not empathize with your spouse, he or she feels like an orphan, uncared, unattended, and lonely. When you lack empathy, you feel you are always right and your spouse is always wrong. This makes you clash with your spouse as if he/she was your bitter enemy. Your home becomes a battleground with each trying to prove the other wrong. Do you know empathy is like a microscope? It has the capacity of penetrating deep into the mind of your spouse, and it reflects back to you what he or she expects from you. This is the reason your marriage gets better and better when you empathize with your spouse. Did this video make you understand why empathy is important for your marriage? Marriage Realities will have many such relationship eye-openers. Subscribe to my channel to understand your marriage in a new light. Press the bell icon for updates about my latest relationship videos. Make love forever until death do us part, your relationship goal.